Hi, today we're going to look at zero trust security. Now, what happens in traditional security models is that there is an assumed trust perimeter. So things within that perimeter are entirely trusted, while things outside of that perimeter are not trusted, right? So typically that trusted perimeter tends to be a office network. It might be the office building, it might be a couple of buildings together, but essentially there is an idea of a perimeter, and anything outside that is untrusted when it starts off. And once you're inside this perimeter, right, once you're inside this building or once you're inside the physical network, then you're just assumed to be a fully trusted person or a fully trusted device, and you're generally given access to all systems within that perimeter, right? So for example, this user, once they're inside this trust perimeter, they have access to machines 1, 2, 3 and all of them. At the same time, if there is a person outside the network, right, say for example, this is a remote worker, they are not automatically trusted, and therefore there is going to be a security check to enter that company network and that building or that virtual perimeter that they have. And once they provide their password, say using whatever system, an online app or a VPN, then they have access to everything inside that network. So even for users outside the network, they could become a trusted person who's virtually inside that network. This, like I said, is also applicable when you use like a VPN to remotely connect into your your company's network. So you might be a salesperson offline, you might be a DevOps person who has to work on some critical issue that has come up late in the night, and then you don't want to drive to office. So what do? You connect to the VPN, you log into the network, and once you're in the network, if it is so defined, then you're basically given access to everything inside that, right? So you don't have to be physically within the network, within the building. You could be outside also and still have complete access to everything within the network. Now, there are a few considerations with this kind of a traditional approach to security. And this is obviously something that you've seen in other physical places also, right? So for example, when a guest enters your house, they have access to pretty much the entire house, right? They're able to go into a medicine cabinet or a cupboards. You're not locked every one of them and kept the key safely. Usually they're left open, right? They can go to the kitchens and the bedrooms and all of that. Now, this kind of an approach, right, for the traditional security has some issues that we need to consider. So, for example, in this case, when there is a person who's logging from outside, usually they log in, say, via the computer, right, and get into the VPN. And if they've forgotten the laptop, say at a restaurant or bar, or they've gone somewhere else, and maybe somebody misuses it, maybe somebody steals this thing, right? In which case, that attacker also has access to all the things inside, right? So in this particular case, let's say this person was working outside somewhere in a coffee shop and their machine got stolen, and now this person has access to all the machines within this network, right? The entire network is available on this stolen computer with the VPN access already logged in. This is also a concern for machines that talk to each other. These are not just about human users, but also about devices and machines and applications that need to be continuously communicating. So traditionally, once you're inside the network, right, again, all the machines within the network are given like free access to talk to everybody else. We make the assumption that it's been configured properly, nobody will do anything malicious or even something accidentally wrong, and therefore all machines get to talk to each other. Now you've got the same problem here, right? If there is an external attacker who's somehow gained access to one of the machines, now they've got access to all the machines, right? So even individual machines are really not trustable, given that there could be a breach on any one of them. And this is what we call usually the escalation of privileges, right? Where they get in onto, say, one machine, and then they gain privileged access to other parts of that network. Again, this is a concern with single sign-on systems where usually your username and password and your credentials are in a cloud identity provider. Say for example, when you log into some application, they might say, log in with Facebook or log in with Yahoo or log in with Gmail or something like that. So in some of those cases, if you've got your central identity, and then you're using the same identity for multiple applications, like in this case, again the same issue happens, right? If an attacker has got access to that credentials, in that single sign-on system, they've got access to all the applications, right? And clearly this is again going to be a misuse or an abuse of whatever application credentials that this person gains. So the key issues that we saw with the traditional approach is that a single point of security and control is ineffective, right? With a single sign-on or a single VPN point. Automatically assume trust leads to increased attack area. So if you just assume that everybody within my network is reliable, that they will always behave well, they're always trustworthy, and they will never make even any accidental mistakes, then it increases the potential for error. Automatically assume trust within a perimeter also, whether it's of people or devices, is dangerous, right? This has always been the case for a lot of insider attacks, and insider attacks are growing rapidly. Today, some of the big issues are with insider attacks. Maybe they themselves were not initially malicious, maybe they're trustable people, but then they have been bribed to do things for an external attacker, and this has been a constant issue of late, right, where there are people inside the network itself who turn out to be untrustworthy or not trustworthy after a while. Also, wide permissions and privileges for system access usually leads to escalated attacks. So they might come in with a user who thinks, you know what, I really don't have much privilege, all I can do is enter some data. But if that person has been given a wide set of permissions, even without their knowledge, right? Maybe they don't know about it, but the system administrator says, I don't have the time to go give them specific access. Let's just give them everything. And I'll cover this in the principle of least privileges in another video. But this is an issue where they have a lot of privileges that they don't really need to get their work done, and therefore the external attacker could escalate whatever is the user's capability, their own privileges, and or conduct some kind of attack or data exfiltration. So the zero trust security model says, that is not going to work. The issues we saw, we need to have a better way of doing this. The key idea in this is that you trust no one and nothing, whether they're apps, devices, whether they're internal to the network or external to the network. You say, you have to authenticate who you are. So every request is going to be authenticated or verified or validated to ensure that there is no person who has, even if one of those machines is breached by an external attacker, that it doesn't automatically mean those privileges spill over to all the other machines, right? Even users and requests within that current data center, right? Even two application requests that might be on the same machine, even they have to continuously authenticate to ensure that there aren't any breaches midway. So in this case, what you see is that there is no inherent automatic security within a perimeter, right? Whether that user or device is within the network or outside the network, they're going to be treated similarly. Everybody has to authenticate themselves, and of course there is going to be an authorization part to see whether they're allowed to do a certain action. But at least the authentication part has to be continuous and for every request that comes in. Again, we're going to apply the principle of least privileges in this case, where we say if a person needs only one permission or to do a particular job, they're given only that, right? Don't give them 20 more, which could be abused. One additional thing that is recommended is also to constantly log access to your systems and to analyze the data frequently, right? Even with everything that you do, there might still be breaches, and you want to ensure that all access, all data that is used, especially in the most sensitive of use cases, it is all logged and it is continuously analyzed, right? So that is how you can even discover a breach if it ever happens. So the zero trust security model says trust nobody, right? There is zero trust except for the bare minimum application that is going to be run, or that small entity, whatever it is, right? It could be a part of an application also. So in this particular case, if there is a company network, there is zero trust that is automatically assigned or assumed, right? So if there is an external user who's coming in to this company network, they have to authenticate themselves before they use even one single machine, right? Even if this is another machine within that same company's data center, right, within that same network, they still have to authenticate to the next machine, right? And as I said, even applications that talk to each other, even if they're on the same machine, they also need to continuously authenticate. Same for devices. Say for example, today there is a concept of bring your own device, right? Companies don't buy you your iPad or your Pixel phone, right? You have to get your own device. So how does the company trust that this is a valid device? And the zero trust security model says everybody, anything you do, you authenticate, right? So devices also have to authenticate, and so also obviously people within this network. Just because you enter the building and you have got a laptop, it doesn't mean that you're treated in any special way, right? You still need to continuously authenticate. And this process is also going to be constant. It is not going to be a one-time check, right? The security check is not going to be just at a point of entry, but it is going to repeatedly happen. And that essentially is the zero trust model, right? So what are some of the considerations when using the zero trust security model? One is, of course, as you add more and more security, this might increase costs of compute and latency, right? The more checks you have to do, the more verification validation that you have to do, it means that there could be increased time spent before the user is able to do what they really have to do. Of course, all of this is usually automated, so it's not like they have to wait like an hour or two to get permission. But even then, with large number of users, you will see there could be a cost to that compute and speed. For the users itself to constantly have to be challenged, right? To constantly be challenged when they're saying, "Hey, I want to log into the system," and they keep asking for password or they keep asking for something else, it increases the friction. So that is something you're having to balance, right? When you have a lot of security, typically it means there is greater user friction to start using the application or system. So what modern systems do is not to keep challenging the user for a password or a SMS code or a authenticator code every time they need to call a new application, use a different application. What instead they do is they collect parameters about that user, whether that person is coming from the same location that they access the application from before, right? So if they were currently in New York, and tomorrow there seems to be a request from, say, London, the system will tell, you know what, we don't recognize this location that you're accessing from. We're going to challenge you with, say, a username and password or some other code. But if they continue to use in the same location, say their office in New York, which from where they were using it before, the system says, okay, we kind of understand that's the same location. So it should be a good parameter to say it is this might be a legitimate user. But of course, again, you're not depending on one particular variable. You're also going to see which device have they access from. When I log in from, say, one MacBook and using a username password, if I go and do the same thing in another place, usually they challenge me for an extra code, saying that the system doesn't recognize this new MacBook Pro or new MacBook or mobile phone. Therefore, you will have to give some other authentication, right? So using some authenticator code on your mobile phone. You can also add this with usage patterns and behavioral factors. If you're a person who's usually not spent a lot of money on on online purchases, and suddenly they see a large amount of jewelry or a new car being bought, the system might escalate that and say, you know what, we want to ensure that it is you, and we will challenge you for another key or another code. There is one company that I have also partially invested in who's doing things in the area of behavioral factors. So Neoide, what they're doing is they're using factors like, how does a person type, or how does a person scroll on their mobile phone, and these kind of factors also decide or are able to give extra authentication, right, without the friction to validate a particular user, right? So if, for example, if my grandmother used my mobile phone, they might have a different way in which they type and scroll compared to the way I do it. So if my phone got stolen, say by my child or another person, they are able to identify, you know what, this is not the same usage pattern, and therefore we're going to challenge them with some kind of extra authentication, right? A second factor or a third factor authentication is then brought up. And of course, depending on the sensitivity of data, you might give more and more challenges. In certain cases, they might say it doesn't matter if that person is a different person, okay, just pass them through, right? But of course, in certain cases like financial transactions, you say, you know what, we want to be very sure that this is exactly the person who they claim to be. In the idea of a perimeter, right, we still need to have a certain perimeter, because it would be impractical in certain cases to authenticate everything all the time. Again, for cost of compute and latency, right? And there might be what are called micro perimeters of a few trusted devices, or a few trusted applications that talk to each other, and they're not continuously challenged all the time, right? So that is another concept that could be employed to reduce the friction and reduce the cost of compute and latency. A few things that I would recommend that you look at: BeyondCorp Enterprise. This is Google's implementation of the Zero Trust security model, and it is it is a service that you can take on Google Cloud. There are also other things like IAP, or Identity Aware Proxy, which says if you're building an application, we will, or rather Google will do the work of authenticating that person, right? Using multiple factors that we talked about, like where is the device now, what is the location, what kind of things have they done before. So using those factors, it is able to identify the user, and you don't have to create your own authentication mechanisms for your application. Also look at Security Command Center, which is the security and risk management platform, which allows you to see the kind of access that is happening, what are the privileges that are already given, what are the firewall rules, and you are able to audit them regularly, and also give you recommendations. Say, this is too wide permissions, maybe you should reduce the privileges assigned over here. So that's another thing to look at. And you can also look at Chronicle, which is a security analytics platform. When you've collected a lot of data about access, you want to be able to analyze them very quickly, and Chronicle allows you to do that, and it gives you recommendations based on Google's own threat intelligence that it does for all the other applications that it runs. If you find these videos useful, consider supporting me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Also, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more learning videos on Awesome GCP.